part of a very old industry which has almost disappeared in Australia, probably 3 tanneries left in Australia. We're one of the only tanneries in the world who do a whole process and produce coloured leather. The remaining tanneries are very large tanneries, mostly based in China. So we had to find strategies that were going to get us ahead and work through our future. Do we have a future? We've been told by politicians, we've been told by bureaucrats, we've been told by everybody that we're a dying industry. You're not wanted. So we had to change all that by doing R&D and research. And today that's what we've done. We face another challenge. In 2025, the major brands that we supply worldwide in the athletic footwear are all going to a zero discharge. That means water, chemical, everything. Everything has to be contained on site. We can't get the chemicals into this country through the federal government's NICNAS program for the registration to do the chemistry at this point. We're working on that. So that's our whole aim, and that's why we've survived and others haven't.
I guess a big part of Peter's theme is strategy such a critical role at the board level, and I look at our own industry, the accounting industry, where there is a lot of work that we do in compliance, and you say, all right, what's happening in terms of pushing that work overseas, what's happening in terms of computerisation and technology, and the presumption for both accountants and a number of other professions is that a lot of that work can be, won't exist or exist in a fairly different format in a period of time. So I guess the challenge for us is to say, all right, what is the strategy to react to that? And if you don't consider those issues, then I think you're either going to, as Campbell suggests, either disappear or alternatively be a lot less than what you are.
There's a real challenge here on how far ahead we focus. The temptation in a fast-moving world is to build strategy in the short term. So a lot of IT companies, a lot of tech companies, you probably heard of Xero, the online accounting software, big in New Zealand, even bigger in Australia, going gangbusters around the world. They're one of these companies, and they've got this guy who you'd think he was on steroids. I know Rod Drury quite well. He's just an amazing guy, great guy. But everybody thinks that these guys have peeled off an 18-month to 24-month strategy. It's wrong. What they've said is we are in such a fast-moving environment, if we shorten our horizon to that environment, we'll be like a cork in the ocean or a washing machine, and we'll just get bobbled around with because we're trying to pick winners. So what they did was they carved off 10 years. And they said, our strategy is to be globally significant. So they lifted above. And at the moment, that means we use Microsoft technology, cloud-based hosted systems, and we look like a small enterprise or small medium enterprise accounting software company. Actually, the strategy is they're a financial services business and they've got a 10-year growth deal. That doesn't mean they've only got a 10-year deal. They've got a second thread called, what are our short-term pieces that dovetail in with that? And so that's where the reactive goes. So the complexity for us as boards is, what is that longer-term, above the technology, bigger deal? And that's the really hard bit. And then what are the chunks underneath it that we peel off and respond a little bit more? It's a bit like the aircraft carrier and the nimble speedboat. Both and become critical.
Thank you, Peter. That was a wonderful presentation. It took me back to my MBA days. I felt like I was sitting in a strategy session again. I have a small business. It's a family business. I'm a sole director and my husband is, so it's been a family business, 14 people. We just brought in a shareholder into the business and that's part of my long-term succession plan. I'm quite interested in the panel's advice or input into at what point is it worth my business looking at a board or an advisory panel, and what value can that bring to such a small business? I know there's a couple of other small businesses around that might have similar interest in that question.
So first off, it depends. And that's probably not a helpful answer, but it's probably a very truthful answer. Governance, so we need a board because you're a proprietary limited company. So we got that right. But I guess what you're talking about is the practices that we would normally see in a boardroom, the formality, the governance pieces. If the shareholders are also the directors, are also working in the business, then I'd assert you don't need all the formalities of corporate governance. That's the first piece. But as you start to have absentee shareholders, which is what you're describing, then you need to start thinking about having a more formal set of board practices in place. Start to think about. But it's not, I wouldn't expect to see a full-blown set of stuff that we're talking about here this evening until you're more up into an environment where many of your shareholders are not actually working in the business day to day, and you've got a more distinct separation between shareholding, ownership, and control, that is management. Because you need the proxy in the middle to look after them. Sorry, I haven't got 3 hands to do that, but it's a developing thing, and it depends on how big you want to get. And have you and your husband got that answer? You know, these are the sort of questions that you need to be asking. My wife and I have got a company. We've got nothing that looks like corporate governance, and we've got no agenda to do so. Because it's a trading vehicle to limit the liability around our 2 activities. End of story.
Thanks, Lloyd. Question for the panel. Peter, in your presentation, you described the environment that we're in as very disruptive.
Yeah.
And I guess the need for the board to change to be more strategic in its orientation. So my question for the panel is one about talent on the board.
You guys.
And really, do boards have the kind of talent that is capable of the kind of strategic thinking and forward thinking that you're thinking about, that you're talking about, as well as a mix of obviously the compliance pieces as well, because it's a very different, what you're asking for and what you're suggesting is a very different talent set.
Yeah, it is. So why don't we start down here? You. Okay.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Absolutely.
We're probably not a good example in some of it. What that lady was saying before about two shareholders, two workers, 2 executive directors. The left hand reports to the right hand. What does that create in a family business? No need for it. And Peter answered that very well. But there comes a time when you've got to do it a little bit better. We've been through those years. We had an independent chair of our board. They were advisory guys. When things got really tough in the GFC and we were losing a lot of money, that was the last we saw of those people. They didn't want to be associated with a loser, and we looked pretty bad at that point. We have improved since. So we're back in the game again with having formal board meetings with the 3 directors, all executive directors. One will be a non-executive very soon. But we've also arranged we're starting an advisory board. So we bring in an external guy who's a business coach. He's worked with the factory through many of the staff, through industrial issues. He's a psychologist. He's been a great asset to the company. So he'll come in and chair that advisory board. So that's our direction for the future, and I think we're going to add to that and put some different people with some other skills to give us a wider perspective of what we're doing.
When you've got directors that have been coached and understand corporate governance to mean compliance, and you embrace this value-creating concept and you decide that as a board we need to be facing more forward, then necessarily you need to look at those skill sets. But if many of your directors have had executive roles, they actually understand what strategy is. So that's around redeploying their headset rather than redeploying the person out and getting a new person. So that's a sort of a cultural contextual shift for smart executives that are actually quite smart directors, and turning off some light bulbs and turning some new ones on. So the first comment is people can reorient themselves, and I think that's important for us to recognise. We didn't get to where we are in our careers by being muppets. Okay? Second point, that if you are in a fast-changing environment, or if you're exporting to China or whatever, there may be some technical skills that, quite frankly, you lack around the board table, and it's smart to go and recruit for those. So that's a competency-based deal. The third thing, and Lloyd knows what I would have a view on this, and that's probably why he gave Graham and me the answer, responsibility. Advisory boards, we need to be really, really careful around deemed directors, shadow directors and these sorts of things. If it quacks like a duck, if it waddles like a duck, and you get into trouble, the judge will probably say you are a duck. And so my view on advisory boards is no. I know it's popular, and I know I'm swinging against the tide a bit like a salmon. They get to swim up the tide once and they don't get to come back. We know that, and hopefully I'm not in that situation. But with advisory boards, if you've got a company situation and some directors, my best advice to you is buy that external advice. Don't call it an advisory board, don't have minutes, don't have an agenda, and don't pretend you're running a board of directors with a different name. Buy that advice in on a commercial basis, take those recommendations, and then as the board or as the management team decide what you want to do with it. If you're serious about governance, breathe in and take the full director route.
Yep. John Mailer from CEO for Pro Trade United. Listen, following on from the lady's question here before about setting up a new board, particularly an advisory role for a company, what do you see as some of the rookie mistakes that are made when you are looking to bring on an advisory board in the first place? And Campbell, Lloyd suggested I target this question at yourself to kick off the conversation.
Good one.
I was happy to answer the previous question, Lloyd. I don't think I can add a lot to this one.
Campbell, I suppose I suggested to target that question of you because of your role in a number of startups, and especially some fairly quite left field startups like Swarm Farm and that sort of stuff. So I suppose that was the premise of the question, was going, yes, you might have a board.
I'm still going to duck the question. I've had a lot of political skills in doing that. Can I answer the previous question? That's what you do, you see. You answer the question you want to answer. I'd like to be provocative for this evening. I don't think Australian companies are particularly well equipped to deal with that previous question. Because I go back to this change and, you know, I'll try this on people. Have you read the McKinsey report? Are you in touch with what robotics will do to transport, building construction, hospitality, food services? There's something coming. It's like we're a country nationally who's had 20 years of great growth, and the mining's been great, and tourism's been great, and all the other things have been great. But we've just hit an air pocket, and it's like we're all standing there, and it's Boxing Day back in 2004, and we're standing there, and the sea's that way, and there's the beach, and what's that roaring sound there, Peter?
It sounds like
there's a big wave coming. And so my point is that we have to adapt very, very quickly because other people are doing it better than us right now. We've got to see the opportunities in this change. We don't have to view it as a threat. We've got to see it as an opportunity. The biggest opportunity, I believe, is somehow going to be harnessing these young people who don't quite see the same barriers as us, that are into the technology and savvy, and somehow we've got to recruit them, not necessarily to the boards, but we've got to sort of have them advising us and telling us how to do this stuff and do it real smart. So I did want to answer the other question. Lloyd?
And you've done that now.
Yeah. I think Peter should answer this question.
Mate.
Stunned silence.
No,
Yeah.
Here we go. So number one, and I'm going to run into a bit of I might run into a train wreck on this one, but I'm going to give it a go. There is a category of contributor in our economy in New Zealand, and I suspect they're over here, and they're called board consultants and board recruiters. And they'll have you believe that you need XYZ boards set up ABC way immediately or sooner. And I don't buy a bar of it. The demarcations that we've heard about and the proximity that I've talked about, particularly at the lower end of the market, are very, very real. When you've got smart guys, scientists, engineers, idea-generating entrepreneurs, the best thing that you can say to them is surround yourself with good people, worry about the formal governance later, get your beat rate up to a high level, and get out there and start to make it happen. Sorry, that's what I think. Now, you need to be talking to a lot of people, including politicians and others, But you need to also be understanding that there's a lot of people who will come and eat your lunch if you give them a chance. And you need to be a bit wary of those people. That sounds like a negative answer, and it's intended to be so at a particular slice of our community, certainly in New Zealand, certainly in New South Wales, and I suspect here in Queensland.
Hi, my name is Rikesh. I sit on a number of companies and I'm a CEO of all of Australia. Now I want to come back to the board to put a question to them about conflict of interest for board directors. And just to give a bit of a background where I'm coming from, is our technology, talking what Campbell was just saying is so true about disruptive technologies, and Peter, what he was mentioning just earlier in his presentation as well. Our technology, what we do is we wirelessly charge electric cars, so there won't be any service station going forward. We'll charge the vehicle, electric cars, buses, trams, while they're on the road.
Yep.
So on our board, as we started this startup company, it so happened that the board of advisors we had, they all started putting the handbrake, like Peter said, into the company's progress. And what that meant is, being Brisbane-based, it's a small place, Brisbane. On the board of advisors, we had individuals from the likes of energy companies, industry, and a few associations here and there, goes into Department of Transport, Public, TransLink, and so on and so forth. So they have basically, the board decided at one point that no, you should not go into public transport because you'll be in conflict with Brisbane Transport. Now, when the independent advice that we saw gave us the comparison that Brisbane Transport would save $1 million per year by replacing one of the buses with one of ours as an operation cost. And the board's advice was, no, don't do that. No other transport company would take on our technology because they would not want to invest in it because they've got already vested interest into what they have already. So where we stood at the point in time with Department of Transport was, no, don't become an operator. From the management point of view and operations point of view was, no, we got to disrupt this market. But board's point of view was, no, you should not go there. At the end of the day, that whole board of advice and the board was let go. And the company eventually set up vertically integrated companies where they now have a public transport license, and they also have a power distribution license to supply power. So we are in a position where we're disrupting a couple of major stakeholders in the energy sector and public transport. But this was no help to the board. And at the end of the day, the question I want to put to the panel is, how do we manage conflict of interest from board members?